right, so first we're going to do a brief background on the buyer's market, who we are, where we've come from, what our show is about. Then we're going to talk about the differences, the key differences between a retail show and a wholesale show, or how you run those two businesses differently, because there are some really essential disparities between them. Trade shows, we're going to talk about the advantages and the challenges of doing them. There's great ways to spread what you make to a wider audience, but there's obvious risks and challenges in doing that before you take that step. We'll do a little bit of an assessment to see if you're ready, and we'll talk about if you are ready, if you feel you're ready, we'll talk about the application process, which differs from show to show, but we'll give you our process, and it will probably be helpful in applying to other shows as well. And then again, we'll follow up with a Q&A, and you can participate in the Q&A in two ways. One, you can send us chats at the bottom of your little control panel, and then you can send them directly to me, or you can send them to everyone, and they'll read them. There's also a little symbol at the top that has a hand, and you can raise your hand, and if you have a microphone, I can allow you to ask a question verbally. All right, so we'll get into the content today. And the entire session will run about an hour long. So the buyer's market of American craft. We have been in business for 30 years. The show was founded by Wendy Rosen in 1982. Our 30th anniversary is actually this coming February show in Philadelphia in mid-February. And it was started as a way to, when Wendy was traveling to a lot of local retail festivals, local craft shows and fairs, she kept hearing the same issues come up when talking with artists, that there really wasn't a venue that they could professionally sell their work to stores. Stores would, come up to them, buyers would come up to them at fairs, and it wasn't always the best time or place for them to do that because they're working directly with customers. Or if they were already in the trade show market and they were already wholesaling professionally, their only opportunity pretty much to do that was going head-to-head with large corporations that might manufacture their work overseas. And that is putting yourself up against an insurmountable, really unfair situation to be in. So larger gift markets are not always friendly to small businesses with just one or two employees. And that's what we strive to be, an alternative to that. We are a resource for you to learn more about your business, to improve your skills. We will help you through the entire process. So unlike a larger gift market where you're one of thousands of exhibitors, you work with the same one or two people from the start through the application process all the way to on-site. We're there to greet you and welcome you to the show. Many times that's with a hug or just a handshake if it's the first time. But we really treasure our exhibitors, and if you come years and years and years, as many of our exhibitors do, it becomes a family. We really support each other in their businesses. So what makes us different is we're also exclusively American and Canadian handmade work. So you must prove to us in your application that you are using domestic suppliers. We want to know what level of fabrication is involved, how much of you are you making versus purchased components, how many employees you have. If you are using contractors, they have to be, again, local. You have to have a hands-on part of that process. So we're very thorough in checking, in owning up to that claim. We do screening that buyers are there for the reason of buying American craft, and also on buyers' behalf, we screen our exhibitors to make sure that buyers know that they are getting the best, responsibly and sustainably made products in the U.S. and Canada. We're family owned and operated. As I said, Wendy Rosen founded the company in 1982. I am actually Wendy's daughter. I've been with the company for several years and have now taken on the show as director. So just like most of our exhibitors and the majority of our buyers, we are a family business. Wholesale is all we do from the beginning. You come to the show with your samples prepared, and that you write orders on them. So there is no exchange of goods for money at the show. There's a couple advantages to that, and we will go into that in detail later. And the February show is our largest. It's an average of 800 to 1,000 exhibitors, depending on the year. And it's really the largest of its kind that is an exclusively American and Canadian wholesale only trade show. All right, so some of the benefits to wholesale: it stabilizes your income. There are specific buying seasons throughout the year, and so you can more reliably plan for those times when buyers are more active and preparing for their next 6 months or their next year in wholesaling and filling in their inventory or finding new work. Retail shows, you're frequently at the mercy of the weather or various other factors that you can't really plan for, and you have to do a lot of them to fill in, to make an equivalent income for wholesale. So wholesale orders, especially when they're nurtured over time with reorders when you're not at a show, provide a much more stable platform for you to realize your income and plan for the future for growth. One advantage is obviously that you are going to one place, and stores from all over the country are coming to you. So it allows you to expand your market beyond just your neighboring city or states that you might travel to, because not everybody, when they do retail shows, drives 11 hours to a show. They might drive 3 or 4. So this allows you to expand greatly your geography where your products can be seen all over the country. We do also have buyers from all 50 states, as well as a few from Canada, the Caribbean, Alaska, and even a few that are international, but we're very careful to screen them to make sure that they are appropriate for our show. The greatest thing about wholesale is that artists can be often outgoing people, very energetic, and they're obviously passionate about their work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are great salespeople. Many of them are, but there are a significant number of you that prefer to stay in your studio, prefer to be in creation mode and not be so extroverted. And it's also just difficult talking about your own work because you don't want to seem immodest. You don't want to over gush or sell your own work. It's just a little awkward to do. So letting a sales professional do that for you is much more effective, and it takes some of that pressure off yourself. They're also expert not just at selling in person to person, but more importantly, they can display your work in an environment that helps it sell better. And it also, traveling at shows, as I mentioned, many retail shows can replace 1 or 2 wholesale shows. As much as 14 or 15 retail shows might be equivalent of 1 wholesale show that you do every 6 months or so. So it allows you to have much more time at home in the studio and less time on the road. That's probably the biggest benefit to many of our artists. Trade shows there are many reasons to do a trade show besides just selling. In fact, depending on what your goals are, you might be there for something. You might expect not to make sales at all. You might be there just for things like national media exposure. We do have magazines from all over in various specific mediums like ceramics or fine jewelry, as well as general style publications, things like that. It's efficient and cost-effective. As I mentioned, you're traveling to one place once a year or twice a year, and all of the buyers are coming to you in that location as opposed to selling door to door, which would cost you, if you priced it out, how much of an investment on your part it costs to acquire a lead or close that lead to an actual sale. The cost per sale is much, much, much more expensive, several times more expensive, with you going person to person and trying to sell that than the alternative, going to a trade show and having it come to you. Mostly that's because the people coming to trade shows already are in the frame of mind of buying. That's why they're there. So they have the budget prepared, they have their purchasing priorities prepared, they're ready to buy. And they might be looking for exactly what you have, or they might not, but through pre-show marketing, through effective booth display, and all these other things, you can change that. It's very powerful when you have many people combined in one place because it's a collaborative marketing effort. The show director, the show management is only half responsible for bringing buyers to the show. We have a large database of buyers we've acquired over the years, 60,000 names, something like that, and it doesn't do you any good to have all of those names. So we market to a large number of that, but those buyers aren't necessarily going to carry what you produce. But what benefits everyone is I can bring thousands of buyers to the show. They may not know once they get in the door to go to your specific booth. That's why collaborative marketing helps, because we can expand beyond the list that we have. If you're new and you say that you might not have any galleries yet, someone who has done the show for 5 or 10 years has a list. They're more established. They have a list that they've grown that they know are good stores they want to be in or that they already are in. They're sending those people information, and those buyers may see you, a newcomer, at the show and buy from you. So that network expands broader and broader the more that exhibitors help each other out. So it's kind of like a karma thing, You put it all out there and then it helps everybody else benefit. One great thing is you don't have to put a lot of cash flow out. You don't have to put a lot of outlay in creating the work, because you're not making all the inventory beforehand. You're making just samples that you display with at the show. And then orders are placed based on those samples. So you've already sold what you're going to make, and you can not waste expenses in making stuff you're not sure that you're going to sell. So that's nice. It's a fantastic networking opportunity, and that's not just during the show hours. All of the events that we have surrounding the show are very important. There's the Niche Awards, some of you may be familiar with. That's a national competition for students and professionals in contemporary craft, and that is held at our winter show. All the buyers are looking at that to see who's coming up in the craft community, who's making stellar work, and you can certainly use that as an opportunity to market. If you're a finalist or a winner, you can bank on that with tying that into your booth display. And we mentioned earlier that the audience is ready to buy. That's why they're there. They're not going to go through the trouble and expense of traveling to a show without needing to do business and fill their stores. And it's a better return on investment. It is a serious investment to buy a booth, to build a display, to travel, all of that. But over time, the relationships that you build with galleries and stores are going to come back, several fold as you establish them, because our buyers are very loyal, and you want reorders throughout the year. It's not just about the sale you get at the show. It's about the relationship you build at the show and that you nurture over time for repeat business. That's what wholesale is about. All right, so we've already talked about this to some degree, but this is how it works. You You bring the samples and you do one of two things. You write orders if you're lucky enough to get them to buy right off the bat. You then go home with those orders, you fulfill them, make the work, and then you ship it. And then you follow up later. You want to know, how is it working? How is it selling? Have customers made comments about colors they wish it had come in, or do they wish it was smaller or larger, or that it hangs on a wall? Things like that. And you can tweak necessarily, because the more you communicate with your buyers, the more successful that relationship will be. And you can instill, a good dialogue with your stores, and then build that into reorders later. And the other, if they don't write orders, then you're gathering leads. And leads at trade shows are worth their weight in gold. And they are only as good as your follow-up, because the store is not going to, the buyer's not going to follow up with you about that work. Once in a while they do, but it's really your responsibility to take that, to engage them once they come to the booth, to get their information before you give them a catalog. You need an even exchange. So you're not just handing stuff out and hoping they get back to you. You're asking them questions about what kind of store they have, where they are, who their customers are, what's the demographic, So you're giving them some information, but you have to get some back. And then it requires repeat follow-ups before it gets to a sale. It might be even the second or third show that they see you. But just like any kind of marketing, and exhibiting is marketing, it's just visual form instead of print form, or in a magazine. So the more they see your brand, your name, your product, any design aesthetic that ties into it, it just reinforces, oh, I remember that's a really beautiful piece. I think I might want that in my store. They may not have, and there are various reasons why they might not buy the first time. It might be that they didn't budget for it in advance, so they didn't have, money for it that year. Or they might need to drop some line in their store that isn't selling as well, so they can create shelves in their store, room on the shelves for your work. It's various things. And then, the goal, obviously, of follow-up is so that you can eventually turn that into an order. All right, so here we come to the biggest concerns that we hear from artists who are thinking about wholesale but not sure if it's right for them. If you only make one-of-a-kinds, to be honest, you will be making it unduly difficult on yourself. We have a few artists who successfully wholesale one-of-a-kinds. They operate a little bit differently. Instead of bringing samples, they're bringing the actual work that's going to be in the stores, and they're bringing a little more inventory. And once that piece is claimed, they are marking it for the buyer and tucking it away and putting something else out. You still can't do exchange of goods for money at the show, because you're there. It's there for business only, and once you start selling physical pieces, it becomes a tax issue with the state of Pennsylvania where our show is. So you want to ship that out either immediately after the show, or at the business center, or just go home and send it with a thank you note and a catalog and any follow-up you want to do. Most of our artists are only one person, or a husband and wife team, or mother and daughter team, and what if you can't supply thousands of little widgets or earrings or clocks to a big buyer? You have to know that our show, the nature of our show, means that you're not going to see Macy's, you're not going to see Walmart, certainly, at our show. You're seeing, for the most part, independent, small businesses that are really creative, funky stores that are on your local main street, or some of them are, niche type of specialty stores, garden stores, gift shops, boutiques, fine jewelry stores, a couple catalogs that we have, but again, they're ones that are looking for that customer that is more discerning, that understands and appreciates something that's well made and different. They want something different than you find that anyone else is going to be wearing or using. So these are stores that, because you're making few things, not thousands and thousands of them, that's what's adding value to your work. That's what makes it special. So, it's extremely rare that you're going to have a buyer come up to your booth and say, I need 5,000 of these. And if they are, then, and you're not prepared for that, just be honest. Just say, you can turn them down for any reason you want. You might have, and there are reasons why you wouldn't fill an order with somebody. Perhaps you have a store that's in the same zip code and you don't want to compete too heavily and oversaturate that area. But certainly if you feel that you can't fill an order in the time frame that they need, or it's too high a quantity for you to produce without hiring someone to help you with production, just be honest with that person, because nothing spreads faster than bad reputation in that department. And something as simple as a calendar to block out that time can be helpful in saying, this week I'm going to be working on ABC Gallery stuff. These 3 days, this is a little fill-in order. I can turn that around quickly for XYZ Gallery. So just make sure that you're not overbooking yourself and you're being realistic on your demands. The most common thing we hear with why people are afraid to do wholesale is because they can't cut their prices in half. And that is when we always emphasize that that's probably because you're underpaying yourself, basically. You need to start setting your prices for your work, even if you're not wholesaling, to make sure you're getting a good retail price. You need to make sure you're accounting for things that artists often forget to pay themselves for, like overhead, like even an hourly wage. A lot of them just take their materials and times it by a certain mystical number and think that that's enough. You have to account for all those things, and then once you set that plus a margin of 20 or 30%, that is your wholesale price. So you take your time and your labor and all that, and you add a margin, make a wholesale price, and then that number is taken by the gallery and doubled, which is called keystoning. Or more frequently these days, stores are selling at 2.2 to 2.5 times your wholesale price. And that's going to vary based on the type of store it is. Somebody who's on Rodeo Drive is charging a lot more of a margin than, they have a much higher rent than somebody who's, in Main Street in Louisville. And then the risk, we want this to be honest with you. There is risk, and it can be 2 shows or 3 sometimes before you start seeing the return that you want. But like any kind of advertising or marketing, you do have to have faith in it. You have to have faith in the greatness of what you make, and to put that out there for a while, because it takes several impressions for somebody to have it click in their head and know that that's what they want. Right, so we're going to do a little poll, and that'll come up right now. And just take a few seconds to fill that out, and I'll let you know what the results are. All right, I think everybody's had a chance to make their decision. Well, we had a few people who didn't make it, but it's a decent sampling. There's so a quarter of you, your biggest concern is that you're not going to make enough profit. And with a simple readjustment in your pricing, which nearly everyone does their first wholesale show or just after their wholesale show, if they don't plan ahead and realize once they get to the show that they're underpricing their work. By the second show, they've definitely learned. 8% of you are afraid of being overwhelmed by the workload, that you might have to hire someone to help. And 67% of you are concerned about trade show expenses. Okay, great. And I meant to do this earlier, but let's do one more quick poll so that we have just a sampling of what everybody's individual experience is, at what point in their career they are before considering wholesale. All right, and I'll give you about 15 more seconds. We have a few people who haven't voted yet. All right. So this is fairly common. This is 36% of you are entirely new to market and you've done retail shows only. 45% of you have some wholesaling experience but probably have not done a trade show yet. So you've been approached by galleries independently, or you've sought galleries independently and you have your work in a couple of them, either by consignment or just a few accounts that you're now actively wholesaling to. And 18% of you have exhibited at a wholesale show before. So that's great. That's a good round experience for everybody. All right, and we'll go back into our webinar here. Right. Oh, something else I meant to address was the buyers at our show are pre-groomed to know that the nature of what you make is by hand, that not every single item is exactly alike. So even though people have a production line, they're not machine made. They're not exactly alike. It's part of the beauty and the value of what you sell as an artist, that everything is unique. And that's part of your pitch. You have to sell it that way. Everything you do is part of that message, that it's made by the designer, and that's what makes it special. They want to know the story behind the work. They want to know about you, because that's probably half of what they're buying is you as a brand, not just the work. And then just reiterating that the majority of our exhibitors are small businesses with 1 or 2 employees. A small percentage more than have maybe 3 to 9 employees, and just a handful, 5, 6 companies maybe, have more than 10 employees. And even those are ones that started with us 20 years ago and have evolved over time to have that number of employees under their supervision. And the principal of the company is still around in most cases, because we require that the lead designer or the owner of the company exhibits at the show, because that's what our buyers want. They want to have that direct connection to who's making the work, to learn more about the story, which they then pass on to their consumers. Okay, refining your line. Your line has to be consistent and cohesive. It should look like the same person designed it all. That doesn't mean you can't have different lines. You can have a high-end line and a low-end line, or something in the middle. You can have different. If you make nautical stuff, you can't. You can say one day that you are tired of making fish and you want something else. But it has to look cohesive. If you take one piece out of your line, out of it and separate it, and you're looking at just that without the others, it should still say this was made by so and so. It has that signature something, and you need to vary your price points. And by that, you don't have to make $15 little things. If you make $5,000 work, art glass or fine jewelry, whatever, that's not what that means. That means just sort of creating a shoulder on either side of your normal product, so that you have an entry-level piece for somebody who's just starting with, that likes what you make, but might not be able to afford, a $5,000 piece. Maybe they might be able to afford a $3,500 piece. And it sort of works them into and up to that aspirational piece that's more expensive. And also, the more variety you have, stores like that as well too. They're not going to buy all the big pricey pieces. They're going to want a variety, because when they're displayed together, they tend to sell multiples of things, or more than one piece. So it's effective for it's a display thing as well too. And a lot of people ask, how much is enough for wholesaling? That's going to vary depending on what you make. If you make wearable fiber, you may only need 20 or 30 pieces. If you make jewelry boxes or little wooden items like jewelry boxes or belt buckles or things like that, you're going to need a lot more to fill a space effectively. You want to have a good selection, like I mentioned, in various price points, but setting up a booth and looking at it shouldn't be too cluttered with stuff. You don't need to bring absolutely everything. So if you make something in 9 different colors, don't bring all 9. You can have 2 or 3, and then your catalog will sell the rest of that for you. And also your line sheet. Line sheet is simply just that. It's a sheet with your product line, and all of the variations it comes in, and then the prices. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It has your logo at the top and your contact info, and then it's just a sheet of paper. Many people just make it in Excel. And when you produce a catalog, and you invest in making a nice printed catalog, it also isn't necessary. A lot of people use CDs or thumb drives now. And it does give you an opportunity to follow up with people after the show. So it's not always a great idea to hand that out at the show, but you certainly can if someone's really serious. You can print the thing once, and then as your prices change from year to year, you just put the line sheet in there and save some money. And how it's presented in your booth varies from person to person. You can organize it by theme, by color. You can create a package, which is sometimes a useful sales tool. You might have your best sellers in there, and then maybe a high-end piece and a couple lower-end pieces. As I said, like an entry-level thing that somebody who's interested in, likes your design, but wants to just try it out first before committing to a larger investment. Putting that together in a package for someone who's new to carrying your work, that's very attractive. You might also throw in some kind of incentive, like free shipping or additional buying. They can spend another $50, at your expense to add onto their order, something like that. I don't recommend discounting, because it doesn't say the right message about your work. The value of your work is the value of your work. You don't want to say suddenly that it's 20% cheaper. So it just isn't. And once you give them something like that, they're going to ask for it again and again, even though it's you only intended to run it for a limited time. So we're not really a fan of discounting. Okay, so you want to. Here's the reality check. Talking about risks further with the show, the hardest part of making this transition into wholesale is that you have to change your frame of mind completely from being an artist to a business person. That's the hardest thing to do. I'm not saying you should stop being yourself. You shouldn't stop being an artist and thinking creatively, but to make a business succeed, and that's what you're doing. You're being an artist professionally. You are a business. You have to think like a business from beginning to end when it comes to wholesaling. And buyers, many of them were artists, so they understand how this transition happens. But once they become retailers, you better believe that they are business owners first and artists second. They will expect professionalism from you, both in service and the way that you appear. Not just, and I don't mean just what you're wearing in the booth, that you should wear a suit or anything, because you shouldn't. And we don't really have anybody wearing suits at our show. But you need to look professional, and your brand, the whole visual package of how you merchandise your work, how you present it in the booth, and even your paperwork, that it looks professional and polished and organized. All that goes a long way to getting a buyer to commit. You need to have a long-term plan for this. So many times we have people start out and they have these pie-in-the-sky expectations. They do a show and they don't make what they expect, and then they're heartbroken. So it's a really hard thing, and they take it personally. And as we mentioned before, buyers have so many reasons that they might not buy from you the first time they see the work, even though they love it. They love it, and it has nothing to do with you or the work. It's just that for various reasons they couldn't make it happen right then and there. So it takes time to establish this. And that just means you have to be prepared for the long haul. You have to form these relationships with the galleries and with leads, and they take regular maintenance until they blossom into a financial investment. Because and that's what it is. You're investing in the show in order to get access to buyers. Buyers are investing in you if they pick up your line in their store. If they're doing it right, they're going to spend money announcing your launch in their store to their customers. They're going to send out newsletters, e-newsletters. They might take an ad in the paper with your work. They might host you in a trunk show, or have some kind of special event in their store to announce new work. So it builds excitement around it, and that your line succeeds in that store. And then they order from you again. So that, it's an investment on their part too. They want to make sure that you're right for their customer. One of the things that scares buyers off the most is if you're a newcomer and you might have great work, but if you don't have all of these foundations that make you appear stable, that you're going to be there from year to year producing new work, they'll smell that, and they'll be scared, because if they make that investment and then suddenly 2 years later you decide that you'd rather be a massage therapist and you can't support yourself as an artist, that will make them run the other way. They need to count on, once they establish a following in their store for your work, that their customers come back, on Valentine's Day or the next time their mother's birthday comes around, that you have new work. You're still producing new work every year. And our most successful exhibitors say that they bring about approximately 30% new work every year. That's the right mix that keeps the line fresh for repeat business. Some artists are worried that when they make the same product over and over and over again, it's just going to drive them crazy. And if they make one more picture frame that looks the same, they'll just go insane. And that's very real. That's a real concern. It's very valid. But we find that most of our artists, when they are getting paid what they deserve for that work, and they're making money and supporting themselves very comfortably with that work, they don't mind as much. The challenge is you have to mix it up and make sure that you do certain things, schedule it out in your day, that you are having the opportunity to play, to create new things. And part of that 30% new work every show, that's you schedule that in, that you're kind of designing new stuff. And also things like mentoring or teaching at a local art school, things like that, they also help keep you from getting bored with repeat orders. And also the financial risk. We've said before, but we want to stress it is entirely possible and even likely that you might not make a return on your first show. But the important thing is not to see this as a failure, because in fact breaking even on your first show is seen as a success. As a new exhibitor, it can take several shows before that interested buyer finally commits. And the saddest thing is that we see artists who are extremely promising, they have the most beautiful work, and they do everything right the first show. And by the second show or third show, they lose heart and they don't come back. That's generally when the buyer comes to us and says, where is so-and-so? We really were looking forward to finally placing an order with them. And then, I have to tell them they're not there. And, I'll happily pass the information on, but by that time, the reality is the buyer is probably going to spend that money with somebody who's at the show, because out of sight, out of mind, and they can just do it all at once, So they'll find a similar product to fill in that purchasing priority on their list. All right, so we'll go into what our booth fee includes. Our standard 10 by 10 booth is $2,250, so that's $2,250. I know that sounds intimidating to many of you. We do also have small new exhibitor booths. They're a very limited quantity, but they are 5 by 8s, and those are $1,100. So that's a fantastic value over a standard booth. And you have to consider which works for you depending on how much room you need and also how established you are in your business. Sometimes being with the new exhibitors, you want to make sure that you're being seen as serious. And I really do believe that our buyers all honestly think that if you're ready to do our show, then you're ready to do business. So it's not negative that you're in a new exhibitor booth. Regardless of where you are on the floor, you're marked as a new exhibitor in our show guide. But if you want to see, there may be advantages basically in being located around the more established exhibitors, basically. So our booth package includes pipe and drape around 3 walls, or 2 if you have a corner. It's silvery gray. I do not recommend that you use just that. Almost everyone in our show does some kind of personalization in their booth display. And you want to make it look like an extension of your designs. So it's, from across the aisle, someone can clearly say that, oh, that person makes gold jewelry and it has an Indian aesthetic to it. It's got swirls and looks like henna and is really beautiful. So whatever you need to do in your display that communicates that, you want to make sure you do that. It also includes, the booth package includes a company sign. It's just a standard white sign with your company, your name, the booth number, and where you come from. Customizing signage is very important, and having large format photography so that they can know what you make from a distance, and then that lures them into the booth. You get a listing in the show guide and promotional materials, which are brochures and stickers that we produce. And we give them to you. They're included. You can have as many as you want, and then you send them out to your list of buyers. If you don't have a list of buyers, you have to start building one. These are people you want to be, that you aspire to be in their store. You don't have to have an existing relationship with them. Do the research online. Look at other stores, other artists that are wholesaling, where their work is located. Look at your local SBA. Look at even lifestyle magazines in your town. If Baltimore has one where a bunch of great retailers advertise, and you have to do it one by one, because that's really the only way you're going to build a list that means something to you, and you know that list of buyers are actual people that might buy your work, and therefore you're not wasting money later when you mail to them. Drayage material handling, that is simply the labor of accepting your packages if you ship, and then putting them in your booth, putting the empty boxes away during the show, bringing those empties back to you, and then helping your packages get outbound to wherever they go, your next show or back home. That's usually very, very costly, but we bundle it in with the booth, and it saves everybody a lot of money. You get a chair, and you get subscriptions to our two magazines, Niche and American Style. Niche is a trade publication directly to retailers, and most of them are attendees of the show. And American Style is an arts and travel magazine that's available on newsstands. So that's for collectors. Here is just an example of how your expenses might look for a show. There's the booth fee, electrical. Our electricity is mandated by the facility, so the convention center requires that you purchase electricity, whether you use it or not. And everybody should be using electricity. You have to light your work well, otherwise nobody will go in it. We have our lights at half power during the show so that each individual artist can dramatically light their work and make it look, how it needs to, because somebody in glass is going to light their work totally different from somebody in wearable fiber. Shipping, that obviously changes depending on if you decide to drive up with your own vehicle and unload all your stuff, you're just paying gas and parking. If you ship, it can be very expensive if you custom make a booth out of wood or metal, and it's very heavy and you need special, or if you make very fragile objects and you have a lot of special packaging involved in that. So that fluctuates greatly from person to person. And marketing, that's the bare minimum. You should be spending some money on sending out postcards. We do offer a cooperative postcard program where you send us cards that you've designed and we mail them to our list of buyers, and with registration information. And you want to at least do some other things like phone calls or newsletters. Again, you can cold call people. You want to make sure that you're announcing to them that you're going to be there, because it's that much easier for them to recognize your work and then make a commitment. But no matter how you do it, expect to spend between $4,000 to $5,000 for your or $3,500 to $5,000 for your first show. Our application process is a little more involved than other shows you might have been involved with, because we qualify everyone to make sure that they are in fact making the work in the United States. So we do ask a little more in-depth company history. We want to know who your suppliers are, how we can contact them. We want some references. You do not have to be wholesaling actively in order to apply. There is a section where we ask for wholesale accounts, but if you don't have any, just say none. We want 5 product images and a booth shot. If you have a retail booth, send us a picture of your retail booth. And if you've never built a booth before, give us an idea of what you expect to do, whether that's just a little sketch or if you want to get fancy, a CAD drawing. But even a written description of what you expect the booth to look like is fine. We want to know that you have a plan, though. Product images, make sure that they are crisp, they're high res, they're clear, they're lit well, there's not a lot of glare off the work. And generally you want one piece per picture, and it should be on a neutral background. Do not send work, don't send us some of your work that is on sand or on rocks or on velvet. It gets very distracting. The best images are just letting the work do all the talking, the art, and it's on a gradient background that's very neutral. We want to know what your pricing is, because we're going to warn you ahead of time. If we think that your pricing is totally off whack, way too high, way too low, we need to know. And it's also going to tip us off if somebody is making the work unfairly, abroad. Then the really, really low pricing is going to tip us off to that. And also, you're required to submit a $750 booth deposit. That we don't do anything with that money until, unless you're accepted, and then you return a signed contract. So If you send us a check and for some reason you're not accepted, we'll mail that back to you. Here's just an example of a nice jury slide. In this case, there are two pieces in that, but it's just showing that it comes in two different colors. It's the same piece twice. But again, see, really well lit, makes it come alive. It's on a neutral background. Here's a picture of a good booth shot. She's got nice bright lighting. She's got large format photography of her work so that it can be identified. Jewelers in particular, or people that make very small items, need to pay attention to this because it gets tedious looking from booth to booth at work up close. And if the easier you make it on the buyer to identify what you make and how you make it, or what the benefits of that piece are, it's, the more likely they're going to come and investigate further. And this is just a nice general booth display. She's got things at different levels and on different backgrounds. You don't have to have your work behind glass. You can be a little less guarded about security at a wholesale show because everyone is reviewed for that they have a reason to be there. We don't let just Joe Schmo off the street because he has a business card. We make sure that all our buyers have a purpose there, and that they do buy American craft. They have to provide purchase orders or invoices and information about a brick and mortar store. If they're an e-retailer, we do review them carefully, but we do have a few people that are e-retailers. And the process is we conduct a phone interview with just about everyone that applies, unless we've had an in-depth conversation with you at a show or that we are very familiar with your work beforehand. We'll give you a call and assess why you want to apply, where you are in your business career, and what you hope to get out of the show. We check your suppliers and references if necessary. And then it comes to an in-house review committee, which consists of the exhibits managers, myself, the show director, and sometimes Wendy Rosen, our president. And if we need clarification on techniques or anything like that, we'll ask a specialist for some input. And then if you are accepted, we send you a response letter, a contract, and then, as I mentioned, you send that back signed, and then we would process your deposit and assign you a booth for the show. If you were not accepted, we will send you a letter as well that explains why. If you aren't accepted the first time, don't lose heart. We let you know why. We encourage that you call us so that we can have a conversation. It might have been something as simple as that we had too many people making glass pendants with animals on it that year, and as soon as that person either leaves the show or changes a medium or a section or whatever, if we're not oversaturating a certain category, then we would welcome you back in. Or, maybe your images weren't clear or you didn't give us enough information in the application. There's a lot of reasons. So we want to open that up. And if we feel that you're not ready, we're going to be honest. We don't want you to fail. We don't want you to come and do the show once and then never come back again. That's not good for us. It's not good for buyers. It's not good for you. So if we feel you're not ready and you need some more business training, we refer you to the Arts Business Institute, which is a nonprofit that teaches business skills. They have a seminar that is 2 days long during our February show, and if you want more information on that, it's artsbusinessinstitute.org. And here's just some resources real quick. Wendy wrote a book many years ago. It's had a couple editions, but it's out of print currently. You can still find it on Amazon, and it's called Crafting as a Business. It's still fairly relevant. We're hoping to release a new edition of that in the next few years, but a lot of people still refer back to it and say it's very useful for them. It has various forms and worksheets and practical information you can pull from it. A great book on business and design, specifically for jewelers, is Profiting by Design by Marlene Ritchie. DesigninganNBA.com is a fantastic blog by Megan Allman, who is one of our exhibitors, and she does have a lot of great free information on there, including an e-course on pre-show marketing. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then, a lot of resources are available to you right in your neighborhood. SCORE and SBA are two nonprofit groups that help small businesses get up and running. They have mentor programs and free classes and things like that. So see what's going on in your area. Your Chamber of Commerce might also provide business education. And local guilds. Sometimes we do have guilds that exhibit at our show, and that's a great way to have hands-on experience doing the show. Also, if you feel you're not ready but you want to learn more, partnering up with somebody who is exhibiting and offering to be a booth assistant, that's probably the best hands-on training you can get for doing the show. Setting up a booth, selling in it, breaking it down, learning what that whole experience is from start to finish is the best training you can get. And then the Arts Business Institute I mentioned before, definitely go there. They have a great blog, and they do interviews with artists, and there's business tips, social media information, lots of stuff on there. All right, so that's our session for today. I'm going to open it up to questions. So go ahead and start sending those in at the chat box at the bottom, or you can raise your hand using that little icon at the top. Okay. Michael wants to know when we purchase electricity for the show. Electricity is purchased through your exhibitor kit, and an exhibitor kit is a very long piece of documentation that you get once you've signed up for the show. We send that out about 6 to 8 weeks before the show, and it's it has forms in it from us, from show management, and it has forms in it from the general service contractor or decorator, which is, our decorator is Hargrove. And they send you all kinds of forms on renting furniture, on renting carpet, on electricity, on virtually anything you could need, you can rent. You want to make sure that you cost that out, because sometimes if you're coming from California, some things are just worth paying more for the convenience, like carpet. And if you're close, but you haven't built a display that's custom, you might want to rent some tables and bring your rug, or put up your own lights. Or if putting up lights yourself is intimidating, you can have electricians do that for you the first time around. But that paperwork goes out about 6 to 8 weeks before the show, and you just fill it out, fax it in, and they'll have it ready for you. And since it's required, if you forget, they'll nudge you. Okay, Frank wants to know how we go about accepting payment. Is it best to take a deposit and then balance at the delivery? The majority of traditionally in wholesaling, you have what's called net 30 terms, where you take an order and then you make the work and you send them the work when it's ready with an invoice for net 30, meaning they pay within 30 days. That is something you want to do with a gallery that you've established with. You can trust them, and you take references with stores. By the way, when you start an account with somebody, they should be providing you with references of other artists they work with. So the first time around, you might want to do a deposit or make sure that it's paid in full before you ship the work. A lot of people these days will take a credit card number with the order, but not a deposit, just the credit card information. And then when the work is ready, you two agree on a specified time when you're going to turn it around. And when the work is ready, you contact the buyer and say, I'm going to ship it out tomorrow, and I'm running your card today. That's the most common. Some people, if you have very high material costs in this economy, it might make sense for you to have a small deposit, 10 to 20% deposit for material costs, and then make the work and charge the rest when it's done. Okay. Bruce wanted to know about a three-sided freestanding booth display. Your booth isn't freestanding necessarily. It's we put up pipe and drape, so it's metal pipe and it has drapes on three sides, or two sides if you have a corner. Then that two sides of your booth would be open towards the aisles. Your booth should be freestanding within it. You can hang very light things off of the pipe and drape, like signage or very lightweight foam core or something like that. But your displays should be freestanding within that space. And I should stress the space that you get at the show is very bare bones. It does not include carpet. It does not include furniture other than your chair. And that's just because we want you to have a blank slate, because if we made an elaborate package, everybody would change it anyway to meet their own needs. So we strip it down to the bare bones and let you customize it according to what kind of work you make and what you want your booth to look like. The postcard mailing, I got a question about some details with that. That is a form that also goes out in your exhibitor kit, or shortly right after. We'll send that directly to exhibitors. And you would send us cards in increments of 500. So the smallest amount you can do is 500 pieces, and that costs $175. You're paying to print your cards your way, though, and you can use both sides because it's going to be sent in an envelope with show information and in most cases with 10 to 20 other artists' cards as well. And what you're paying us for is the labor and basically the labor of organizing all that and stuffing all the envelopes, and then we pay your postage to do it outbound. And it's a good way of just generally promoting. If you're new to a show, we generally recommend that first-time exhibitors do that. All right, and one last question. Okay, so someone asked about, just to break down the wholesale pricing again with a formula. The formula changes from person to person, but you want to make sure you have your overhead costs. So that some people include things like packaging or marketing, but basically your rental, your machine costs if you have maintenance on machines, things like that you need. You take all that stuff, add it up per month, break it down again back to an hourly expense for how many hours you're working or how many hours it took you to make a piece, and then your hourly wage. So when you want to make sure that if you break it down to the smallest item that you can do, it's easier for you to multiply it out how long it took you to make a piece, and then add your margin. And then that number, your hourly wage plus your overhead, plus your what margin you want to make for profit, that number then gets doubled or times 2.2 or 2.5 by the gallery. And you want to make sure that if you do sell retail, that you are not undercutting your stores if you sell online in particular. At retail shows, that's a one-off event that generally doesn't conflict with stores. And you can certainly run specials on things you want to move if you have a line you're discontinuing or something. But with retail, if you sell online, you have to be careful about undercutting your stores, because this is a relationship that you want to nurture and keep going. And people are very web savvy these days. If they see your work and it's marked as yours in a store, they'll look on their phone and see if you're selling it cheaper, and that doesn't help the store. So, if you help nurture that relationship by having cards, if you go to a town, and there's one of your buyers is local, ask ahead of time if you can get postcards from them or information from them, and send them, direct the customer, whether they buy or not, back to that store and say, look, I'm really glad you like my work. You can also see it all year round at so-and-so gallery. And that goes a long way, just for, mutually supporting each other. Okay, and Cheryl had a question. Cheryl, if you have your microphone on, I will unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. Cheryl, are you there? Cheryl? No, I guess it's not working. Okay. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for participating today. And if you have any other questions, please, call us, email us, info@rosengrp.com. We really want to encourage you to ask us anything about your business. And also, if you are interested in applying, we review on a continual basis until the floor is filled. There is room in the February show at this point. So every week to 2 weeks, we review applications. And thank you again for participating, and have a good day.